Yeah, it was it was a shock for us. I mean, when I heard yesterday, it couldn't sink in. I thought, it can't be. I only had a text off him the day before. It just seemed unreal, you know, because it's too much.
For decades, the world only whispered about it. The dark connection between Tony Iommi, the guitar legend, and Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness. But what if everything we thought we knew about their bond, their journey, and their music was about to be shattered? In a rare emotional moment, Tony Iommi recently revealed something that will change everything you thought you understood about Ozzy. Something deep, personal, and raw, a side of their story buried beneath years of headlines, controversies, and fame. Tony, visibly shaken, broke down in tears, opening up in a way fans never thought they'd witness. What he shared about Ozzy isn't just unexpected, it's explosive. The truth, hidden behind the noise of rock and roll, might forever alter how we view one of the most legendary partnerships in music history. From humble beginnings to becoming icons, Black Sabbath wasn't just born out of music. It was born out of struggle, resilience, and an undying bond between two friends. But, as Tony's emotional breakdown shows, there's much more to their story, one that had remained untold for far too long.
The Black Sabbath lead singer, Ozzy Osbourne, has died at the age of 76.
Before Tony Iommi and Ozzy Osbourne became rock icons, they were two young men from Birmingham, England, with dreams of making it big. Birmingham, a city known more for its factories than for music, wasn't the ideal birthplace for heavy metal. But in this industrial city, Tony and Ozzy would create a sound that would change the music world forever. In the late 1960s, they started out as the Pula Tulk Blues Band, a tentative effort to find their sound. After several lineup changes and a brief name switch to Earth, they finally settled on Black Sabbath in 1968. Their music, inspired by horror films, had a dark, eerie vibe unlike anything else at the time. Early on, life was tough. The band had little money, often using second-hand instruments. Their shows were small, playing in pubs with tiny crowds. But Tony's skill on the guitar and Ozzy's voice set them apart. Despite the challenges, they pushed forward, never giving up on their dreams. The breakthrough came in 1970 with their debut album Black Sabbath, followed by Paranoid. The albums didn't just introduce a new sound, they changed the game. Critics may not have understood it, but fans did. Black Sabbath was born, and Tony and Ozzy's chemistry was at its core. But as success grew, the storm that followed would change everything. As Black Sabbath's popularity grew, so did the pressure. What began as a passion project quickly turned into a whirlwind of fame, controversy, and personal struggles. By the early 1970s, they were global rock icons, with Paranoid cementing their place in history. But behind the scenes, tensions started to build. Ozzy Osbourne, the charismatic frontman, was no longer just the quirky, energetic figure fans adored. His personal struggles with addiction became impossible to ignore. What began as typical rock star behavior soon spiraled into something more serious. Ozzy began missing rehearsals, showing up late, or too intoxicated to perform. His actions created a toxic atmosphere within the band. Then came the infamous bat incident. During a live show, a fan threw a bat on stage, and Ozzy, in a shocking moment, bit its head off. The media exploded, and he was rushed to the hospital for rabies shots. But this outrageous act didn't end there. Ozzy bit the head off a dove during another show. These shocking antics soon overshadowed his musical genius. But it wasn't just Ozzy's behavior causing strain. Growing creative differences with Tony Iommi added fuel to the fire. While Tony pushed for musical evolution, Ozzy seemed disinterested and increasingly unresponsive. And so, the pressure mounted, the rifts grew wider, and soon, the decision was made. One that would shatter their friendship and forever change Black Sabbath's path. By 1979, the tension within Black Sabbath had reached a tipping point. Despite their successes, the constant pressure was taking its toll, especially on Tony Iommi. Ozzy's growing struggles with addiction, missed rehearsals, and erratic behavior had strained the band beyond repair. What had once been a dream was now a battle to simply keep things together. The decision to fire Ozzy wasn't made in anger. It was out of necessity. Tony and the rest of the band had tried everything, but Ozzy's actions were destroying the core of Black Sabbath. Firing Ozzy wasn't what I wanted, Tony later admitted, but it was the only choice we had. For Tony, it wasn't just about losing a bandmate, it was losing a brother. Ozzy had been there from the very beginning, sharing not only the success, but also the hardships. Now, Tony was faced with a painful reality, knowing that their bond might never be the same. After Ozzy was let go, Black Sabbath's future seemed uncertain. The band had built its legacy around Ozzy's voice, and his departure left a massive hole. But for Tony, the real struggle had only just begun. The two would part ways, with their once strong bond now broken. Though the split seemed final, both Tony and Ozzy would go on to find success in their own ways. However, the shadow of their past would never fully fade, and their paths were far from over. After their split, both Tony Iommi and Ozzy Osbourne went on separate paths, unsure if they could ever match their previous success. For Ozzy, leaving Black Sabbath wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. In 1980, Ozzy released Blizzard of Oz, a solo album that surprised everyone. With hits like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley, Ozzy introduced a new sound that was all his own. The album's success came, in part, thanks to his collaboration with a young, talented guitarist, Randy Rhoads. Their chemistry was undeniable, and together they created a fresh, electrifying sound. Ozzy's next album, Diary of a Madman, 1981, further solidified his place as a solo artist, earning critical acclaim. Meanwhile, Tony kept Black Sabbath alive, despite multiple lineup changes. In 1980, he brought Ronnie James Dio on board as the new lead singer. The result was Heaven and Hell, an album that proved Black Sabbath could thrive without Ozzy. It became one of their most successful records, both commercially and critically. Though both men were successful, their paths never crossed. However, the bond they once shared was never truly broken, even as the years passed. But fate would eventually bring them back together. Not just for music, but for something much deeper, something neither could have anticipated. In 1997, something unexpected happened. Black Sabbath's original lineup reunited for Ozfest nearly 2 decades after their split. For fans, it was a dream come true. The crowd roared as Tony, Ozzy, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward took the stage together once again. The chemistry was undeniable, and their music sounded as powerful as ever, like no time had passed. This reunion led to the Reunion Live album in 1998, and later, their final studio album 13 in 2013. For Tony and Ozzy, performing together again wasn't just about the music. It was about reconnecting, healing old wounds, and rediscovering the bond that had made them legends. The chemistry that had once defined them was back, and their friendship, though scarred, was slowly mending. Yet, despite the success, there were deeper emotions at play. The years of silence and distance hadn't just faded. The reunion was bittersweet for both men, as they realized how much they had missed. It wasn't just about the performances, it was about healing the unspoken pain. But as their relationship healed, a new challenge arose. Ozzy's health began to decline, and Tony's role as a friend and support system would become more important than ever. The journey they began together was far from over. It was about to enter its most testing chapter. As the years went on, Ozzy's health continued to worsen. In 2020, he made a heart-wrenching public announcement. He had been battling Parkinson's disease since 2003. For nearly 2 decades, he had kept his diagnosis a secret, but as his condition deteriorated, it became impossible to hide. The once vibrant Ozzy, full of energy and mischief, was now struggling physically, and his body no longer allowed him to perform the way he once had. Throughout this, Tony remained a constant source of support. Their friendship, which had been through so much, became more important than ever. Tony was there in Ozzy's darkest moments, visiting him in the hospital and helping him through difficult times. When Ozzy worked on his album Patient No. 9 in 2022, Tony was right beside him, offering guidance and encouragement. Though Ozzy's body had begun to fail him, his spirit never wavered. He kept talking about doing just one more show, not willing to let go of his passion for music. And Tony was there, standing by his side as a friend and brother through it all. But as much as they had endured, one final goodbye was coming, one that neither of them was ready for. It would be a moment that would forever change their legacy. On July 5, 2025, Black Sabbath took the stage one last time in their hometown of Birmingham, England. The show, titled Back to the Beginning, wasn't just another concert. It was a farewell. For fans, it was a once-in-a-lifetime moment to witness the band's original lineup perform together again. For Tony and Ozzy, it was a deeply personal experience, a chance to close a chapter they had opened more than 50 years ago. But this wasn't the same energetic, rebellious Ozzy from their youth. Ozzy, now frail and in a wheelchair, sat at the center of the stage surrounded by his bandmates. His voice, though cracked and strained at times, still carried that same power. The performance was emotional, raw, and undeniably powerful. As he looked out at the crowd, Ozzy's expression was one of pride and acceptance. At the end of the show, Ozzy rolled over to Tony, grabbed his hand, and simply said, "It went all right, didn't it?" Tony, his voice shaking, looked Ozzy in the eye and replied, "Yeah, it did, mate. It really did." It was a quiet goodbye, a moment that spoke volumes without saying much. Fans knew it was the end, but no one expected it to come so soon. Just 17 days later, on July 22, 2025, Ozzy passed away at the age of 76. His death sent shockwaves around the world, but even in his absence, his legacy would continue to live on, carried forward by the music, the memories, and the bond he shared with Tony. Ozzy's passing on July 22, 2025, left the world in shock. For millions of fans, it was the end of an era, the loss of a voice that had defined rock and metal for decades. The news spread quickly, and tributes flooded in from all over. Fans lit candles, played Black Sabbath's greatest hits, and shared their memories of Ozzy. His influence on music was undeniable. Celebrities, musicians, and public figures expressed their grief on social media. Many shared stories, photos, and quotes reflecting on Ozzy's impact. In Birmingham, the city that birthed Black Sabbath, fans gathered in the streets to honor him, playing his songs and painting murals in his memory. For Tony, however, Ozzy's death was more than the loss of a bandmate. It was the loss of a brother. In a Raw interview, Tony admitted that losing Ozzy was like losing a piece of himself. "I miss him more than I can say," he said, his voice cracking. "I kept expecting a text from him, some silly joke, a picture of his dogs, but now it's just quiet." Despite the silence, Tony knew that Ozzy's legacy would never fade. The music they made together would continue to resonate with fans for generations. And Tony, now carrying the torch, was determined to honor his friend's memory in a way the world would never forget. For millions of fans, he was more than just a rock star. He was an icon, a symbol of survival, transformation, and defiance. His influence on music, culture, and generations of artists is immeasurable. For Tony Iommi, losing Ozzy wasn't just the loss of a bandmate. It was the end of an era. Their journey together had been marked by highs and lows, moments of triumph and heartbreak. Yet, despite all the challenges, their bond remained unbroken, even in the face of distance and time. Tony's grief was profound, but so was his commitment to carrying on Ozzy's legacy. As Tony continues to reflect on their journey, he knows that Ozzy's spirit lives on in every riff, every chord, and every note that defined Black Sabbath. The music they created together was more than just rock. It was an anthem for the misfits, the outcasts, and the dreamers. And in the hearts of fans worldwide, that music will never die. Ozzy may be gone, but the story of Black Sabbath and the friendship that made it all possible is far from over. As Tony moves forward, the world will continue to remember Ozzy, honoring the legacy of the man who changed rock music forever. Thank you for taking this journey with us. Keep rocking, keep remembering, and keep the spirit of Ozzy alive. We'll see you in the next chapter.